Well, tonight we have some breaking news here on Stay Tuned. There are new developments concerning the fate of the St. Louis Rams. And tonight we are talking about what our home teams mean to our hometown. And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned. Okay, we are in the studio tonight talking about sports and our local economy and what kind of economy we want to have as a region. We talked about the little breaking news. We have Patrick Risch from Webster University, a leading expert in sports economics. Let's get right to this breaking news we're talking about. Stop me when I'm wrong, because this is developing as we speak, but a holding company tied to the owner of the St. Louis Rams, who has been talking about, it's been rumored that the team could potentially move. This holding company has purchased a stadium-sized piece of land in Los Angeles. Does that sound right so far? And what does that all mean?
I would not want to play poker with Stan Kroenke because I think he'd whoop me.
This is the owner of the Rams.
This is the owner of the Rams. I think this is a tremendous play on his part. And I will also say that anybody that studies communication, it's a great time to lay this news out when everyone's focused on the Super Bowl, right? Just kind of sneak this in. I've said prior to this news coming out, several people have asked me about this over the last 2 or 3 years, that even though they have this deal in the lease where they could get out of the lease if the stadium was not in the top 25%, and I would argue it's probably in the bottom 25%.
And before we go over anybody's head, we're talking about the St. Louis Rams. They play football in the Edward Jones Dome, and their contract says if their stadium isn't in the top 25% of the league, they can walk away and go play somewhere else.
That's right. And I've always said, even though that's there, you have to have a viable place to go to. And where are you going to go to? Well, Los Angeles was the prime candidate, but the problem there is they have not been able to get their stuff together in terms of building a new facility, because the NFL does not want to go to a city that's not going to build something new. So there's one option that's been somewhat thrown to the wayside for the last couple of months because their efforts, AEG, the company that Tim Lewicki, former St. Louisan, that was in charge of at one point, they were trying to get a deal done, it fell through. London, Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, has been very adamant about trying to expand the international reach.
Our Rams have played in London.
Our Rams have played there, and Stan Kroenke owns Arsenal, which is a team, for those people that aren't interested in soccer, they're a team in the EPL, the English Premier League. But again, a lot of people think that logistically that may not make sense to have a team full-time in London. But with this developing news, Casey, I really believe that this is going to make the St. Louis Rams, the city, looking at this deal, all of a sudden it changes the tenor of the entire discussion. Now again, it could just be a ploy to try to get more money out of St. Louis City, but I look at it this way. The St. Louis Cardinals, who are the team of St. Louis, when they built their stadium in 2006, 85 to 90% of that was financed with their own money. So if the darling of St. Louis sports, with all apologies to the Blues and the Rams, if the darling of St. Louis sports only got 10% in public money, what are the Rams going to get?
Okay, so let's back up and say, why does all of this matter? What does a sports team, what do sports teams mean to a city? We hear a term tossed around oftentimes about being a top-tier city. Right. How do pro sports play into that?
Well, first of all, you've got to separate what that means when you say a top-tier city versus the economic benefits that a team brings to a region. I was thinking just before we came on, you think of other cities in the Midwest that don't have professional sports, like the Omahas, the Louisvilles of the world. They don't register as being on the same level because professional sports have such high ratings. Certainly football, baseball, hockey lags behind, but even those ratings can be good compared to other programming. It brings eyeballs to your city. When they come in and out of telecasts, they're showing beauty shots of Forest Park, of the Arch, of other parts of the community. So this is beneficial in that respect.
Is it just for our pride, or does it translate into something real?
Part of it is civic pride. Part of it can be economic benefits. Now, as an economist, when you're measuring economic impacts, and I've got to say, I had to laugh earlier before I came on tonight. I hear reports of the Super Bowl in New York generating an economic impact of $500 or $600 million. I've done studies for 2 separate Super Bowls. Those numbers that they're reporting for this year are just out of control. Economic impact is what kind of money is coming into the region from outside. And in some respects, sometimes teams may inflate those numbers because a lot of the people that are going to the sporting events are coming from the metropolitan statistical area. It's not new money. Now, I will say this. When people come from St. Charles or they come from Florissant or other parts of the suburbia into downtown St. Louis, that does benefit downtown restaurants. It does benefit the city of St. Louis. So in that sense, it's impact.
But there are empty theaters on the World Series game night outside of downtown. There are empty restaurants.
For sure.
Okay, so back to this top tier idea. Can you be top tier without a football team, for instance? Let's say they turn this stadium-sized piece of land into a stadium and our team walks.
You're not as viable. You're not as big time, if you will, because the NFL has the best ratings. They have the greatest ratings. It has become America's pastime. Baseball's time as pastime is past, if that makes any sense.
I think I follow the idea.
So, I believe that, as I was mentioning earlier to someone, in baseball you've got 3 strikes and you're out. If we lose the Rams, that'll be 2 times, and that'll be it.
And speaking of that, people are already saying on Twitter, this isn't even really our team. This is LA's team, and they're here. Do they have the roots of our St. Louis Cardinals? Or are they our hometown team?
No, absolutely not. And I don't know if that's the reason why, again, LA is being considered by Mr. Kroenke. Obviously, you've got some ties out there to the old LA Rams, but again, one of the things that could help St. Louis keep this team is he's not going to get much public money from Los Angeles either, because that was one of the issues before when AEG was planning on building a stadium. They were going to do it with their own money. But again, even if he has to build it himself out there, he's going to be able to generate more revenue from corporate Los Angeles versus corporate St. Louis. And again, because of the market size, he's going to be able to see a greater increase in franchise value. I'm sure he's looking at the Dodgers. And granted, baseball's a different model because you can have local TV deals, and that's where the Dodgers are seeing a lot of their wealth as a franchise increase. But again, I just believe that the corporate community here, it's nothing compared to what you'd have in Los Angeles. Now, again, on the flip side, what kind of attendance would they get? There's always a honeymoon effect, so if he moved out there, they'd get good attendance for a year or two, but there's so many transplants that live in LA. If the team faltered and they were weak, would those fans keep coming to the stadium? Okay,
this is not just an NFL show. We've got a lot more to talk about and a lot more to learn from you, so stick around. Okay. We're going to come back to this wealth of information more than once here in the show, and we'd like to go to the wealth of information that is you as well, so please join us online, #StayTunedSTL. You're already talking. Okay, so can we have a sports city and a cultural city? Is this an either-or conversation, or can you have both? Let's welcome in via Google Hangout from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Michael Langley with Greater MSP, Economic Development Organization in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Michael, thanks for being here. I know you were actually recently named on some list. We all love our list, but both, you've got the hockey jersey on, the hockey sweater on, but we think of of Minneapolis as a pretty culturally rich place as well. Do you have one identity or the other?
I think you can have both. In fact, I think that should be pretty much every region's goal. because the quality of place or quality of life aspect of successful regions is arts, culture, and entertainment and recreation. So let's face it, sports is recreation, it's entertainment, and it's really a cultural foundation of communities.
Okay, so
yeah,
does one
both.
help the other? Do you see the sports helping the arts and vice versa, or do they pair together?
Yeah, and in our region, they're kind of inextricably linked. The way we're organized as a region, if I'm about right here where I'm sitting in downtown Minneapolis in my condominium, I can walk via by our Skyway system from one end of our city in Minneapolis at the Orchestra Hall and our Convention Center. I can walk directly through our Skyway system to Target Field where the Twins play, to Target Center where our Timberwolves play, and now with our new stadium being built, the new Viking Stadium, which is now under construction, we'll have Skyway all the way to the stadium and connections to our Guthrie Performing Arts Centers and other museums and like I said, Orchestra Hall and our the rest of our cultural amenities are all connected. And then by light rail all the way over to St. Paul to the Xcel Energy Center where the Wild play, to the Ordway Theater. So we've organized ourselves to connect all these great regional assets together.
Okay, so just to back up to clarify, you've got all four major sports there in the Twin Cities.
We say
sports.
5. We've also got WNBA, and they're the world champions, so we go for that one too.
My apologies. Okay, so we're talking about stadiums and public finance here in St. Louis. Do the people buy in when it comes to where their wallets are there in Minneapolis?
Well, sure. I think, the closer those investments are together, like, we followed Target Field, the new Twin Stadium, just a few years ago. It opened in 2010 with now the new Viking Stadium under construction. So, you can overplay, the investment game. But I think the Viking Stadium is been funded with both public and private funds. It's pretty much a 50-50 split for that one. And the Xcel Energy Center is just maybe 5 or 6 years older than the baseball field. So we've had significant investment. In fact, just in the last 5 years, $2.6 billion of sports and cultural amenities investment in the region. But that's producing $8.4 billion of sales for restaurants, for hotels, and for hospitality industry. On an annual basis.
And to reiterate, that was paid for. You're paying for things with bonds, with public financing.
It's a mix. The Viking Stadium is about $1 billion investment. Over half of that is the Vikings themselves, and the remaining portion is the state and the city's contributions.
You mentioned transit just a second ago. How does that play into all of this conversation in terms of the success of these franchises and the city?
Well, it's absolutely huge for the future of the region because, as we look at the real pressure on all this is, are we going to attract talented workers and residents to our region to fuel our economy for the future? And it's these transit connections and these amenities, both cultural and recreational and sports amenities, that drive millennials and talented workers to any region. And so we believe that these investments in our cultural amenities and sports are really about talent. It's about the future of our economy and the talented workers that we need in this region. And we want them to love this region, and they do.
We were actually just talking about that very topic here last week. Do the people you're trying to attack, do they want to be a top tier city? And do you buy into that notion at all in the first place, as it pertains to sports?
Yeah, we buy into the fact that there are common denominators that regions need to have to be successful, and this is anywhere in the world, whether it's St. Louis, Kansas City, New York, LA, wherever. The fundamentals. One of the fundamentals is brand and image. How do you feel about yourself, and how does the rest of the world feel about you? And many of these things, whether it's having the best symphony orchestra or having the best football team, all of those things add to your brand and your image. And it's the brand and image that is what attracts people to want to live there, be there, play there, and work there. And so we think it's all connected.
Does being a kind of a mid-sized city make that hard to sustain?
Well, when you think of just Minneapolis or just St. Paul, neither one of those cities by themselves are what you would call one of the largest. But as a region, 3.5 million people, 13th largest metro in the U.S., and a GDP of $225 billion annually. So that's the size of the Ukraine or Ireland or Denmark. So we're a very large global region when you look at the whole metropolitan statistical area. So but even at that level, it's a challenge to understand whether the balance is there for where those investments are going, public investments and private investments. But we've had a pretty good run of it recently.
Thanks for sharing your experience with us, Michael Langley, with Greater MSP from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Casey. It's a pleasure.
We'll be right back. All right, let's continue to talk with the table now about sports and the cultural, the impact of sports on our region. I'll do introductions first. Joining us from the St. Louis Blues, the chairman, Tom Stillman. Thanks for being here, Tom. And welcome back to the show, the editor of CountOnDowntown.com, Frank DeGraff. Thank you, Frank, for being here. And also welcome back to Missy Kelly, Senior VP at the Partnership for Downtown St. Louis. Thanks. And Marty Brooks, Senior VP and General Manager of the Americas Center Complex. That includes the Convention and Visitors, with the Convention and Visitors Commission. So that's another way of saying Edward Jones Dome, which is another way of saying sorry to talk about it like you weren't here earlier. And I also know that when you have a lot of attorneys involved in situations like this, there may not be a whole lot you can say publicly, but it would be a disservice for me not to ask you about your reaction to the news of a purchase of an area in Los Angeles where the St. Louis Rams could potentially move.
Well, it's certainly interesting news and very interesting that it happened just prior to the show going on air. As far as being able to comment, that's really a question for the Regional Sports Authority and the Governor's Office. Those are the ones involved in the discussions with Mr. Kroenke and what happens with the Rams in the future. They're playing in 2014 at the Edward Jones Dome. We've submitted dates to Kevin Demoff, Executive Vice President of the Rams, last week. They're submitting those dates to the NFL. So I know we've got a season ahead of us for 2014, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
It's only one season looking ahead, though. I don't know. That's should we read between the lines there at all?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean,
okay.
The standard practice is we provide dates to the team in January of each year, so that then the league can put together their schedule. So the timing is very consistent with years past. And as far as what happens to the future, look, the Rams have a lease through 2024. The arbitration came out as it did last year. It gave the Rams the rights to go year to year after the 2014 season. Kevin Demoff, I know, loves St. Louis. I heard him on a radio show over the weekend, and he said, look, the fact that the Rams are going year to year is not a news item in the National Football League. The San Diego Chargers specifically have been year to year with their lease for 10 years. So the timing of today's announcement is certainly interesting. I'm a Rams fan as well as work closely with the Rams, but it's way too early to speculate what this means.
And speaking of Mr. Demoff, I should say, too, that we offered them a spot on tonight's show, and they were very gracious and accessible. However, it is the Super Bowl weekend, and their entire staff is in New York for the Super Bowl.
How convenient.
Bad planning on my part. Let me turn it back to the three of you and say, should we care? Is this conversation a big deal for our city?
I believe it's a big deal for our city. We're the 18th largest market in the country, and we don't have to have every professional sports league or team represented here, but I do think it's a big deal for us to lose one that we have this does not mean that we're losing one. This is very early news. And I think more than that potential economic impact is really more of the impact on kind of the brand of St. Louis. I think that there may be the perception out there that St. Louis isn't what it once was. There are big businesses that have moved away, et cetera. And for people that look at St. Louis through that lens, could look at something like this as, St. Louis, there's another black eye for St. Louis. So I think more than anything, it's definitely it could be a PR issue for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think from an economic standpoint, it's not the end of the world, because the money that's already in the region will just be distributed elsewhere. Maybe it goes to the St. Louis Blues and the Cardinals. It will certainly, at least for a little bit. And I think it's more an emotional thing. Sports is not a normal business. So emotionally, nobody wants to lose their team. We've already lost a football team before, so it's PR-wise. It'll be a black eye. But I think if you look at we're talking about first-tier cities. Look at Austin. Look at the Raleigh-Durham area. Look at San Jose. They don't have football teams, and they are the fastest-growing cities in the nation. They grew 40% in the last 10 years, and they're doing very, very well. So, it's not the end of the world.
Mr. Stillman, I'll open it up to you, but anybody can jump in here. What do you see the role of a sports team in the city to be?
I think it has a few roles, and one of them is the one that Missy talked about. I think she's right on target. Part of the brand of St. Louis, or any city that aspires to be a top-tier city, and another way to say that is a major league city, because it is tied into major league teams. And particularly when you already have one, an NFL team, and if you lose it, it's a big black eye. It is, and you can argue back and forth about the specific economics of that team and whether it's moving money around the area or what it is, but it is part of being a top-tier major league city, and that isn't just about something ethereal. That's about keeping bright people here. So when they go to college, they want to come back. It's attracting people from other areas. It's, the companies here being able to bring in the best and the brightest so that they can grow their businesses, make our economy vibrant, and make our city successful. And if you start losing, young people, when they look at a city, they want something to do. They want it to be, a vibrant city, a major league city. And, these losing teams, it hurts that a lot. I think it would be a loss.
So is it important enough that a sports team should receive public money in one form or another?
I think that's a difficult issue, but I think a municipality and a state have to look at it in an objective way and see what does it bring to the city. I don't think, or to the state. It certainly can't be all public money, by any means, but some public money may be justified because of all the positive effects. A lot of them tangible, some of them intangible, in this attracting talent and being a major league city.
I would just say on the flip side of this, the St. Louis Cardinals, it's a very different deal than the St. Louis Rams. The Cardinals are really woven into the fabric of the community in St. Louis and our history, and they, most of the funding that came for their new stadium was private funding. It was not public funding. And I also think that having a franchise like the St. Louis Cardinals is one where people from all over, 40% of the fans that come, of the 3 million fans that come every year, come from out of the side of the state of Missouri. So
now, is that just the Metro East, or do we fudge those numbers a little bit?
I got this from the Cardinals today. It's 40%. It's about 1 million people come every year from outside of the state of Missouri. 90% of the people that come down are outside of the city. So the impact, both economic and then also, again, to the perception and the brand of St. Louis, it's really kind of advertising for who we are. They're coming down here for a very positive event. They're seeing lots of people. They're going into restaurants that they can't go into in the suburbs. They're eating in these buildings that are architecturally magnificent, that you can put up against buildings across the country. And when to your question about why do sports teams matter, things like that bring people that wouldn't necessarily come And then it makes them think, well, I may come back on another day when there's not a game because I didn't get to try that place over there. So I think it's really important. And while the Rams are very important, all of the teams that we have are, I think that we, anything, if this happens, we will weather it like we have, many other storms in St. Louis.
Casey, one of the things that I think we should all take pride in was, if you remember back in the fall, we had a Monday night football game, the first time the Rams had been on Monday Night Football Live, ESPN, in a long time. And at the same time, we had across town the Cardinals playing in a World Series game. It's the first time in history that a market city has hosted both events simultaneously on the same night. And what that does is it showcases not only within St. Louis and the region, and not just with the United States, but internationally, the ability of St. Louis to support major events. And not only did we do a World Series game, we did a Monday Night Football game live simultaneously. So the infrastructure is in place to support major events, and having something like the Rams and the Cardinals and the Blues together playing just demonstrates and attracts other events to the region.
Do you see, real quickly, we have to wrap up the segment, do you see the Blues having a connection to the arts in our city?
To the arts,
To the other cultural amenities, and do sports and other amenities overlap in your mind?
I think they overlap and complement each other. I don't think they compete or detract from one another at all. And in fact, I would point to our complex at Scott Trade Center. In the Scott Trade Center, the Blues play hockey. We have NCAA basketball, all sorts of other sports events. We have concerts, the leading, names and acts from around the world. And then right next door, and we're connected by tunnels. It's really the same structure, is the Peabody Opera House. And we have everything from small concerts to comedy to dance to Broadway there. So, in just one little block, you could see how sports and art do complement each other.
Thank you all very much. We have to leave it right there. We'll be right back. Let's talk more football, but this time not American football. Let's go across our state to Kansas City via Google Hangout to Greg Cotton, Chief of Staff and General Counsel at Sporting KC, the soccer team there. You had a MLS team for some time, I believe. Help us with the history, but you've got a new name and a new stadium. Can you get us up to speed on how Sporting KC has come to where it's be? Because I believe your name, the fame is growing across the state and across the country.
It's nice of you to say. Yes, we started out as the Kansas City Wiz, believe it or not. That was our first name. And then we changed pretty quickly to the Wizards, which was not much of a name. And then we rebranded in 2010 to Sporting Kansas City. And that corresponded with a brand new stadium on the western edge of Kansas City, a $200 million stadium. And we've had a couple successful seasons, culminating in a U.S. Open Cup championship in 2012, and then a MLS Cup championship in 2013. So it's been a long process to get the team to the point of relevancy in Kansas City and in Missouri and in Kansas and in the Midwest. But I think we're there now. So
okay, so
feels good.
So tell us how you did it. I have a sister that lives there who never played or saw a soccer game in her life until she moved to Kansas City, and she is a wild and crazy fan. And you've got a lot of stories like that. How have you had this success?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Kansas City, along with St. Louis, have always been two of the largest per capita soccer populations in the United States, and we took advantage of kind of that latent demand for professional soccer, which really had not been capitalized on in Kansas City, and built a brand that was based around kind of a European fun party atmosphere. We built a stadium that has a bunch of kind of fractured spaces and a bunch of different clubs and party areas and big supporter sections. With the view to trying to create a European or a South American or Mexican style atmosphere in our stadium, and it's worked. And The other thing that's worked really well for us is we have a bunch of local players, kids that grew up in Kansas City that play on our team. I'll give you an example. There's a guy by the name of Matt Beasler, who's basically the MVP of our team, that grew up in Kansas City. He's playing at an all-star level for our team, and is going to start for the U.S. national team, most likely in the World Cup. So a combination of all of those things, the brand, the new stadium, and some success with some local players really did it.
Okay, so I'm learning my sister likes to party. That's how she became a soccer fan. I got that. Okay, you built the brand, but you also built the stadium, and you built a lot of stuff around it. Tell us where and why, and also how. We've talked about public financing here a little bit as well. Can you bring us up to speed on where your team plays and how that's come to be?
Sure. What we did was we designed 3 different stadiums in Kansas City. We designed one on the Kansas side, one on the Missouri side, and ended up back on the Kansas side. We ended up with a public-private financing scheme on the Kansas side that involved a financing vehicle called Star Bonds, which are different than kind of the TIF that's available in Missouri. And we had a really nice TIF, a $275 million TIF on the Missouri side, but that was in early 2008 when the world fell apart, and Citibank's trading at $1 a share, and no new incremental. The I in TIF is obviously incremental, so nothing new was really being built. And so Star Bonds, you can capture all the sales tax revenue in a existing district and use those to pay for your amenity. So that's what we did, and we put in, our owners put in quite a bit of private financing as well, and ended up with a stadium that's the most technically advanced and fan-centric stadium in the world. And so, that's what we did, and that's how we paid for it.
I talk about the development around there. How does that work with what you've got going on?
Well, the area is called Village West. It's in Kansas City, Kansas, actually, and there was a speedway there. There's Kansas Speedway is located there. There's also this is an amazing story, but there's a store called the Nebraska Furniture Mart, which does $650 million in retail out of one location. It's the largest retail establishment in one location in the world. And so that generates so much tax revenue that the unified government is able to build amenities like Sporting Park and attract even more development as it continues to. We as part of our deal with the unified government, there were 4,000 new jobs that were brought to the area by 2 of our owners who are primary shareholders in a company called Cerner Healthcare Software Company. And so they used the draw of sport and the attraction of sport to do some significant eco-devo work in KC.
And tell us more. I'm guessing you would argue that it ripples out from there, the success of Sporting KC for the economic and other advantages for the rest of the region.
Well, it does. We've been fortunate enough to host not only a MLS championship and an MLS All-Star game, but the U.S. national team, both men's and women's, have played in our stadium. For the next 4 years, we're going to host men's and women's Division II and III national championships in soccer, as well as Division II men's football championship in our stadium. And so you're seeing significant economic development that is spurned out of that. In addition, we did about a $13.5 million expansion in our urban park, kind of like Forest Park in St. Louis. We have a park called Swope Park, and we built a training center and an urban soccer park there as well. And so that will generate a significant amount of economic activity in that area as well. And that's all kind of based on the success of Sporting Kansas City and what our ownership has been able to put together.
Greg Cotton, congratulations on the championship and all the other successes we've talked about here tonight. Thanks for your time. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it.
Okay, so as he mentioned, Patrick Risch, not only is Kansas City known for its soccer, but St. Louis is too. Why are we doing this?
I think St. Louis is even more known for their soccer than Kansas City. We've had great history. Bill McDermott, right, Mr. Soccer of St. Louis, he could talk our ear off for 2 hours about soccer in St. Louis. But he mentioned the Star Bonds. I wrote a Forbes piece about this back in 2012. That was really a key. And if anybody here has not been to that facility, Sporting KC, fantastic facility, about 5-6 miles west of downtown Kansas City. And as he mentioned, you've got the Nebraska Furniture Mart, you've got the Kansas Speedway, you've got the Legends Shopping Mall. But Casey, here in St. Louis, the problem is that facility, along with another, if you're going to build a modern, up-to-date soccer-specific facility, it's $225 million. And if we can't raise money to help the Rams improve the Edward Jones Dome, where is that money going to come for soccer? It's just not there.
Just a point of curiosity: can you do both with one? Solve the Rams problem and bring a soccer team with one facility?
No, because Don Garber, the commissioner of Major League Soccer, they are moving towards soccer-specific stadiums. So that means you have to have facilities somewhere between 20 and 25,000.
Can you make a correlation or any comparison to what he's talking about, the activity around the stadium there, and our own ballpark village, which was slower than expected to start? Sure. We do see building construction going on there now. Is there any comparison to apples to oranges a little bit?
I don't think it's quite the same because, again, in that particular, actually Kansas City's done two things. The Power and Light District downtown, that's really helped them become even viable to bring events to the Sprint Center in downtown Kansas City. And then, of course, in suburban Kansas, where you have the soccer park, the speedway, the shopping area, now people can spend a whole day there. If there's a soccer game at 7 o'clock at night, they could go there at 11 in the morning, shop, and then, of course, go to the game. I think Ballpark Village will be interesting. It has potential, especially for non-baseball events during the off-season, make it more attractive to bring in concerts or soccer matches as we've had this year.
You don't think it'll be empty in the off-season?
I don't know if you're going to have a displacement situation. And what I mean by that is when they built the Metropolitan Building in downtown St. Louis, that was great for downtown, but some of that business, some of those corporations that went in there just moved from other parts of the region. So will Ballpark Village displace some of the spending that's going on Wash Ave, right? Wash Ave has had a tremendous growth in the last 10 years. Are they going to lose a little bit of business because now people would rather go to Ballpark Village since it's closer to Busch Stadium before games than go to somewhere on Wash Ave and then shuttle over? That'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Patrick. We appreciate it. Stick around. We're not done with you yet. But first, we're going to go behind the scenes with Anne-Marie Berger from the 9 Network at Fox Sports Midwest. And she, too, is actually going to catch us up on Ballpark Village.
There's disagreement around the impact sports has on our local economy. Some argue there isn't any. Others argue that when there are home games, our hotels, restaurants, and bars see an uptick in patrons. And some contend there's even more to it than that. In St. Louis, due to the Rams, Cardinals, Blues, and even St. Louis U Billiken basketball, there's an entire industry of sports broadcasting professionals who earn steady paychecks year-round.
Dissolve, make your move, dissolve.
Max Leinwand is the coordinating producer for Fox Sports Midwest.
Fox Sports Midwest, we actually oversee all of Fox Sports' product, is regional product in St. Louis, so the Cardinals, Blues, St. Louis University, in Kansas City for the Royals, and Indianapolis for the Pacers.
On this evening, Fox Sports Midwest is broadcasting analysis and play-by-play of the St. Louis Blues versus the New Jersey Devils.
My name is Brian McCann. I work for Fox Sports Midwest as a freelancer, and I run a system called the LSM that is a live slow motion editing system. I do all the Cardinal games and I do the home Blues games, and also basketball and football and... Sorry. You want to show them this?
From camera people to videotape operators to audio operators. We've got stage managers. We've got between 25 and 30 people working on any given home show.
That's just the production crew hired by Fox, and doesn't include those hired for the away team's broadcast or the Scott Trade Center's production crew.
So I know what you're thinking. Oh, come on, Berger, aren't you a little biased? Of course you think professional sports and its broadcasting industry is a good thing. And that's totally fair. After all, I am sitting on Fox's set, which does operate out of 9 Network studio. But who doesn't like jobs? Where's the disagreement?
Well, some politicians and taxpayers don't like the way the city and state offers tax breaks to professional sports teams. Hotly debated is the Cardinals' Ballpark Village and their use of TIFs, taxpayer money used to subsidize redevelopment. There have been delays and critics aren't happy with the lack of mixed-use development in Phase 1 of the project. And we'll hear more from these critics later on Stay Tuned. Bill DeWitt III, president of the St. Louis Cardinals, explains how he believes the Cardinals and their newest stadium has added to the regional economy.
It's something that the city can count on. The city knows it can expect certain tax revenues from ticket sales and concessions and player salary taxes and all those kinds of things. And that continuity, I think, is what allows the mayor and others in city government to budget and to count on that revenue. So, and it's revenue that's grown. It's grown exponentially since we were in the old ballpark. I think the issue of whether Ballpark Village is maybe taking away from others is, I focus on the fact that these are unique concepts. They're concepts that haven't been downtown, tied to the ballpark, and they create a new experience for people. You may have people that would choose to come here versus somewhere else, but with all these events that we're planning, over 200 a year, that's something that we're investing in downtown to create something new and unique and different every day almost. And that's not something existing businesses are doing. So we believe that it'll bring new people downtown, and other businesses around us should benefit from that.
Ballpark Village Phase 1 will be up and running for the 2014 season. And on opening day, Fox Sports Midwest will be broadcasting live from their brand new studio right in the heart of it. Fox Sports will broadcast 150 Cardinal games next season. For Stay Tuned, I'm Anne-Marie Berger.
Let's keep talking about Ballpark Village and more about public versus private financing and greater implications of all of that. Let me do some introductions of who will be at this table, starting with Alex Enan, owner and editor of Next STL. Welcome back to the show. Alvin Reed, also welcome back, of course, just down the studio in Donnybrook, and also a host on 101 ESPN Sports. And also Vicki Lynch, sports consultant who played a big role in bringing these soccer matches that we had here in St. Louis to really successful events there. And Patrick stuck around for us.
3 events.
Excuse me, 3 events. I apologize. Patrick, obviously from Webster University. Okay, so do we have our priorities mixed up? We've got a lot of things we could probably put on a list that needs to be fixed. Schools, maybe some people would say transportation. Other things that need fixes that take a lot of zeros, and we're talking about zeros for sports stadiums. Is there something wrong there?
Who's taking that one?
I'll take that one. I think that if you look at it in the sense that we could be spending this money someplace else, I can't argue with that. But I'm saying that these are 2 separate things. I think when we look at situations, everyone must be judged separately. I'm in agreement with Blues owner Tom Stillman. I think that any athletic team, especially a professional one, brings an intrinsic value to your region that it's hard to some of it is tangible and some of it is not. And like I said, we got breaking news here with this land purchase out, and I want to say for years, even going back maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I had been saying that St. Louis needs to deal with the fact that this lease means that whoever owns the team, and this is when the Rosenblum family still owned it, I said whoever buys the team has an out after the 2014 season. We need to be dealing with that. And as this deadline has come closer, I've been called a fool and the chicken little and all that. And it's not like I feel vindicated tonight. I just want to feel like, look, for the first time tonight, that this is a real possibility of what could happen. And I think it is something that you don't judge against schools or cops or anything like that. What are we going to do to keep this franchise in St. Louis? And this might be the first night where we're really, for the first time, going to have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do to keep this franchise in St. Louis?
So the thing I would add, and I think the thing I haven't heard yet quite tonight, is that people don't seem to really make the argument that there's an economic value to the team. What you hear is, maybe there's an economic value, but there's a great intrinsic value, and we all feel great about it, and businesses look at us, and it's a little bit of ego, it's a little bit of pride. But I've never been able to get down to someone and say, what does this really mean? We're as a community and a state paying $720 million for the stadium. And that number is never quoted. It's always, the stadium was 300 and something million. But
you're talking about the one that's no longer good enough.
Right. So we're paying, and we're still paying that. And even when if the Rams leave, who knows, we're still paying that. We're paying $24 million a year for the stadium. We need to actually make an economic argument. We have to. We make economic arguments for subsidizing transit. We make economic arguments for subsidizing retail outlets. But for some reason, we kind of become blind when it comes to sports. And the argument always drifts back to like, but we're really excited, and there's a lot of pride, and every big city has it. Well, every big city has an NFL team because the NFL is a monopoly, and they decide how many teams there are. And and everyone competes for teams, and everyone gets new stadiums because we're competing against each other. There's zero evidence that an NFL team has a positive economic impact on the city. There simply isn't.
Zero? We have an actual economist with us.
Well, I will say that there's been some mixed evidence across different cities. Mixed evidence.
Right.
There are, and especially, you have a situation, as I mentioned earlier, economic impact, you're measuring what's the kind of inflow of new money coming into the community. Correct. So from a strict dollars and cents basis, if the Rams were to leave and that gave the people that ran the Edward Jones Dome the ability to bring in more conventions, which do bring in visitors from out of town, then at least from an economic standpoint, would that potentially bring in more money? But from an intrinsic standpoint and these intangible benefits, again, you could talk about improving the schools and whatnot, but your best school teachers aren't generating hits on YouTube and ESPN like your local football team.
But you have to see what the payoff is.
You also have to look beyond just the Rams and the ancillary elements that come along with these venues that you have in your cities. I mean, the only reason that those soccer games came to St. Louis, those 3 big international soccer games, was because St. Louis had the venues that they could be played in. I mean, there are a lot of cities that would have loved to have had Real Madrid versus Inter Milan, but because they didn't have a venue that could handle it, we didn't look at it.
And is that just emotion and pride like Alex is talking about, or is there real economic value to that?
I can tell you right now, and I'm sure Marty Brooks would agree, is that the 54,000 people that were in the Edward Jones Dome, I got to estimate that at least 70% of them came from outside of St. Louis and outside the state of Missouri.
So I was in the Edward Jones Dome, and I'm grateful the game was there. The $150 I spent on tickets would have spent on something else. I would have gone to a movie instead. I would have gone to out eat twice. The real studies, and there is conclusive studies and evidence that this is highly substitutable. So the people who buy season tickets for football would buy something else. I mean, there's X amount of money in our region.
Okay, and I hear what you're saying.
And what we're fighting about is whether they spend it on pro sports or whether they spend it on
I hear where they're from. And I hear what you're saying, but, and I don't mean to say, when I use the term loser, I'm not referring to you, but I said that's kind of loser talk because, all right, when I first moved back to St. Louis, I worked for RCGA, all right, and American bought TWA, and it was the best thing that ever happened because X, Y, and Z. Everybody said, I really don't think this is the best thing. But we always put this spin on something bad that, it's really not that bad. And that's kind of how I feel about, I would have spent that $150 someplace else. Well, you possibly would have. Yeah. But the people that want to spend their money on this event may not find someplace else. In fact, some people may find someplace else to live, or some people might find someplace else to do their business because they may not want to come here. And then two, let's say Kirkwood did have the space and the infrastructure to build a stadium. Kirkwood would make it'd be boom times for the 8-10 games that we had there. And you couldn't tell the people of Kirkwood and the businesses there that, it wouldn't be any different if the team wasn't there because the people would spend their money on something else. So you can't say that taking it away, if it's good for a small area, isn't it good for an entire region?
So we've lost a team, obviously, several decades ago. Yeah. We knew in the early 90s a team was coming back. Since the early 90s, the city has lost 60,000 residents. We've lost untold thousands of jobs. Bringing an NFL team in a brand new stadium downtown, I mean, no one thinks one thing is going to save a city. It hasn't had a positive impact. The region has not economically grown compared to our peers.
The Rams couldn't stop a major recession, one. And two, it could have been twice that many without the Rams.
Let me interject something. Let me interject something about facilities, kind of take it outside of St. Louis. And you mentioned earlier, it's all about facilities because you look at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, and you look at Cowboy Stadium, AT&T Stadium. Look at the events that they're bringing to their respective communities. It's not just the team. It's really more about the facility. If you have a multi-purpose facility, you become more attractive. And a lot of these smaller Midwestern cities, like the Omahas, the Oklahoma cities of the world, the Louisvilles, now they've become more competitive for, say, second and third round NCAA regionals, which does bring a little bit of visitor spending because now they have updated arenas. So but the problem here is in St. Louis, if the Cardinals couldn't get public funding for Busch Stadium, there is no. They got a little, but not much.
The ticket tax, millions.
That's true. That's
hundreds
true.
of millions of dollars.
But if they couldn't get what teams used to be able to get, which is 75-80% from the public, there is no way that the Rams are going to see.
Well, Dallas was privately funded.
I don't think anybody expects that the Rams would get. I mean, keep in mind, the NFL has their own little fund over there.
$200 million.
Yeah, they can put $200 million towards the stadium development. I mean, Stan Kroenke, at the end of the day, wherever he goes, he knows in the back of his mind that he has to open the checkbook. So I think that it's unrealistic to think that we would be on the hook for building a brand new stadium.
Well, I think a great point about the stadium is that in Kansas City we have the Sprint Center downtown. They bought it hoping to bring in professional sports, and that hasn't happened. Since they, quote, failed to bring in professional sports, it's been wildly successful. It's a huge profit center for the owners of the Sprint Center. So the facility might matter, and whether it's Scottrade or Chaffetz, the money made is outside of SLU basketball, and it's outside of the Rams sometimes, or the Blues.
And because it's an arena, it's helpful, because arenas are easier to fill 325 dates a year.
A follow-up on what you said, we have a chance to host a Final Four, I guess, in 2015, 2016, 1 year skipped. All right, but the problem we have is we're underdog shot is because the other cities that are also bidding for these 3 years have newer facilities, larger facilities, and beautiful facilities, Dallas, Houston, and that's why we're lagging behind. Now, if we had a new facility, does that mean that we would get a Final Four, or does that mean we would get a Super Bowl? I can't say that, but at the same time, now we're at least in the conversation for getting these things, which we are not right now.
So that's one side. The other side is, what's the economic payoff for a Final Four? What's the economic payoff for a Super Bowl? You look at Indianapolis, it wasn't a huge money maker in Indianapolis. The business community poured millions of dollars into hosting it. There's extra hotel stays for 2 or 3 nights maybe. It's not, better for St. Louis to have a 20,000 person convention that stays for a week. That has a greater economic impact than having a Final Four or a Super Bowl.
I disagree with you, but it still goes back to, I can't put my finger on every dollar that's spent, but I'll tell you what, on a Sunday when there's a game and somebody buys a hamburger out in Valley Park that they wouldn't buy because they didn't go out to go see the game, I don't think anybody can measure that, but I think that's a real financial impact on this region.
And let me add to that I've seen the Smith Travel Research data on hotel spikes with respect to occupancy rates, average daily rates, and hotel revenues. And actually, in the 6-year period that I've looked at, the Indianapolis Super Bowl was one of the largest spikes.
Because they had the new JW Marriott.
Just so everybody knows what's going on here, the rest of the house heard what was going on at the dinner table. And wanted to come down and get in on this. And as we do every week, the show never wraps up while we're still on the air, and we stay on 9net. Stay tuned.9net.org. But unless you had to go, I wanted to. You mentioned basketball. You said long shot. You say on the NCAA.
Yeah, I had an interesting talk earlier today with some folks about that decision that are involved with. They're going to be part of the bid process for bringing that here. I think we have actually a pretty decent shot, because part of getting a Final Four, it depends on your facility. Maybe we aren't the strongest among the 8 cities that are finalists, but we have done a heck of a job putting on Final Fours, regionals, second and third round, and that's a big part of it. The NCAA does not want to take their events to a city that's going to do a subpar job. So that's huge. And even though the facility is not as updated as Cowboy Stadium and the like, there is that closeness, that proximity. The one thing that hurts Cowboy Stadium, and I did the economic impact for that Super Bowl, it's in Arlington. And that stadium has not done much for the economic development of Arlington. You've got to commute from Dallas or Fort Worth.
And you're St. Louis has a reputation for loving events.
I just want to mention, though, Frank Viverito leading the charge there from the St. Louis Sports Commission.
Absolutely.
We wish him a healthy recovery. He couldn't be with us tonight because he's under the weather. So we don't want to talk about him like he's not here.
San Antonio is one of the cities that's vying for that bid cycle, but they're out because the Alamo Dome is obsolete. Exactly.
And with the Final Four,
go ahead.
With the Final Four, I'm involved with the local organizing committee for that event. Went down and met with Indianapolis with the NCAA a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that I think we really have, aside from being able to support major events, is we're a walkable city. And to your point with Arlington, the thing that the NCAA likes about St. Louis and what we have to offer is there's so much that goes around the event, not just the 3 games. It's all of the activities, concerts, and other events that support that. They're now doing the Division II and Division III men's championships games that same weekend. We have the facilities, we have the Scottrade Center, we have Chaffetz, and you can park one place, you can stay in your hotel and walk and enjoy a concert by the Arch, a concert by Memorial Plaza. So there's a lot of benefits to St. Louis because of our ability to host events and our walkable urbanity.
So tonight we've had like some themes are starting to overlap. We've got obviously the sports, the emotions, and the business of what that means. And then we're hearing a lot about transit and the arts, and then we're also talking about talent retention. Sometimes, do these camps need to maybe overlap a little more, or do they enough now?
I almost think they're conflated a little too much. I mean, there's an economic argument that some people will really appreciate and care about most. There are people who care most about the vision of their city and what their friends in other cities think and how much pride you can have in your team. And then, I mean, I love the city, and it's a great place to host an event because, I mean, how many Super Bowls have been in Miami? What a horrible place. I mean, you have to bus from the stadium to the city to all kinds of places. So we're a great place to host events. That's a completely separate argument as to what the economic impact is, as to how much we like it. And in terms of retention, I've been writing a little bit about millennials and what people are looking for. Certainly the NFL and pro sports do not rank as high as they used to in terms of 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. Forest Park matters, cultural institutions matter, great jobs matter, bars, restaurants, things like that matter. It's a little bit less, today we were talking off screen that, I can have a 70-inch TV at home and I can be watching literally every single NFL game at the push of a thumb. So, the NFL has a real challenge in the stadium experience, making sure that matches up to standing in front of a TV and watching every game in real time and rewinding and doing whatever you want. So I don't know that retention in terms of getting that next generation in is predicated very much on professional sports.
And I thought a lot of myself when I was that age. And as I've grown up, I said, we didn't run as much as we thought. And I think that's 20-somethings, early 30-somethings, they may not think a lot about the NFL, but trust me, there are enough people that aren't in their 20s and 30s that it is a viable alternative to actually physically go to the Blues game, to go to the football game, to not watch it on your phone or do all that.
You can't deny the success of the NFL and the Blues.
Absolutely not.
And I would also disagree with your statement earlier about the Sprint Center. I don't know where you're getting your information, but I've had a good deal of dealings with AEG, the owner of the Sprint Center. It is considered by them and around the industry as a struggling venue. It's not doing well. It's not a profit center by any means. It's struggling, and it's a problem for them. It's a problem for the city. So I think you're off on your.
Lots of NHL teams are struggling. Lots of NHL teams lose millions of dollars a year. So it's not a team or not a team isn't the definition of whether it's
but your facts just aren't correct there. That is a struggling venue. It is not a profit center. It's anything but a profit center.
Well, I'm just saying that places with pro teams struggle.
Yeah, it does not have an anchor tenant. It does not have a full-time tenant playing 40 to 50 games a year.
They're just not getting, again, most arenas, it's 315 dates. They're not getting close to that to your information?
It's not my information. It's AEG's information.
Okay.
But not even close, you're saying?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so Frank, I felt like you were about to jump in a minute ago, and I cut you off.
I don't know. I said earlier it was going to be. It's sport is about emotion, and I guess we've seen that tonight. So if you really look at it rationally and economically, it might not. Sports, it's emotional. It's very important for a lot of people, and nobody wants. Even Alex probably doesn't want to lose the Rams if we don't have to, but. It's very hard to put a dollar figure on, what is it worth to the city? And is it really, is civic pride, is football, is that civic pride? I think civic pride means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
The art museum was going to close. We know the art museum is not going to close. But let's say the art museum hit tough times and said, we're going to close. People who have never been to the art museum would be rallying to save the art museum. And you can say the art museum doesn't really bring that much money to St. Louis and whatnot, so why are we drawn to it? Why do we want to have it? Whatever that touches on upon us is the same thing about a professional sports franchise. Now, they're two different things, but whatever drives us to want something in our city to impress other people around the world or around this nation, it's the exact same thing. Be it the Rams, be it the art museum, be it Ballpark Village, be ever what it may. I think how we look at ourselves is so much more important than how the rest of the world looks at us.
It is a unique business, though. I mean, we take a lot of ownership, I feel like, in our team. Those who are sports fans, I should say. A lot of people could care less, I suppose. But.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the economic side, beyond the tangible side, it is a very emotional attachment that people have with fans. And if anything has struck me, it has been that over the last several years. the depth of the connection of a fan to its team. How many people will come up to me and say, I have been there since 1967. If you win the cup, I can die in peace. It is extremely important to people, and it is something that brings people together in a city. It's, what would we be talking about? If it's not the Cardinals in the World Series, where the Blues, where it's a contender this year, it's not that we don't talk about it, but it's part of the fabric, it's part of the conversation that's ongoing.
And
at
do
all
you
times.
see that continuing in younger generations? Because I know you're probably dialed into where the business is headed.
Very much so, very much so. This image of this idea that young kids today, they're just all about, tech and other things. They still like sports. They still like sports, and they're still connected to their teams.
It's also part of community. It's part of the diversity. You're talking about the art museum, whether I care about art or not. It's about, communities are diverse, and there are different aspects of the communities that like music, that like art, that like sports. It's also each of those things, arts, community, events, sporting events, they bring people together that may not otherwise come together. And I think that's one reason it's really important to have the fabric of the community being interwoven with all different things that meet the needs of a diverse group of people.
We, by the way, we're online now. We have a few more minutes left on the live stream. We touched on Ballpark Village a lot, but we didn't go over it. Anybody have any strong predictions for Ballpark Village? Anybody at the table in terms of
we were talking
expectations?
about putting out a bid for the Final Four. If I'm part of the bid team, I'm mentioning Ballpark Village because that's just another amenity that can make downtown St. Louis attractive for visitors. So
It got a lot of slack, though. I mean, there were articles in the paper, not just on Next STL, about all of this subsidizing for a parking lot is what we're seeing right now.
Too much. We were talking. I said, first of all, you start off $7 million in the hole because the Cardinals should have been held responsible for that $1 million a year, whatever. The penalty was for when it wasn't developed, and they were allowed to slide on that. And I just think that, look, I love the Cardinals, do great things for the city. They got enough money; they should have paid that. They should have been allowed to slide on that. I like that Anheuser-Busch is involved in it, and they're going to have the theme restaurant in there. I think it's off to a good start, but like Power and Light District and things in Kansas City, you're going to have to add to what's there. If people are going to go down there year round, it's got to be bigger, it's got to be better. So there's some work to do, but I'm excited that it's opening, and I think that's a good thing.
I think the fact that they're a museum, I think that will be the thing that will really initially draw people in, is that when they open that museum, their Hall of Fame.
Right, and vote for Willie McGee for the Hall of Fame. I'll just throw that in there.
They have a marketing plan that includes a lot more than sports. They are marketing to different groups, people from people that sell candles to knitting, and I mean they have a plan to have that space activated year round. So it was never the idea that when the Cardinals are in town this will be big and otherwise we hope people come. I mean, it's proactively being planned and designed.
Can we support that and Wash Ave, for instance?
Absolutely, and I think that what probably the biggest key there is transit, is making sure that it's really easy for people to get from Ballpark Village, from the stadium to Union Station to Washington Avenue to the MX district, and that's not hard. There's buses, there are trolleys, and you can walk. And a lot of cities, people, we are a big city, we are a real city, but in a lot of peer cities, people walk, and they're not as concerned about doing that as we tend to be here in St. Louis.
You started to say
Ballpark Village is right next to the City Arch River project as well.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just perfectly located to really create some critical mass downtown for something that attracts people.
So I really hope it's going to be wildly successful, and the Cardinals will change their mind soon and start building residential. Because
in Ballpark Village, which was part of the original plan.
I can't see how that would not be successful. Build, because not everybody wants to live in a loft. A lot of people want to live in a new space, and that space is so perfectly located. So I really hope they will build residential and offices, and we can gain some more residents. Because what we need most downtown is more residents, more jobs and more residents. That's the key.
Two comments on transit. Now, I'm a transplant. I moved here in '99. But going back to this walkability, I think that it's interesting how people in St. Louis, especially people that are coming from West County, still have this fear factor of downtown St. Louis at times. So walking from Wash Ave to Busch Stadium for some people is still unfortunately an issue. I agree with you. You're shaking your head. I don't have a problem with it, but there are still some people that do. And then the other transit issue is you know very well before your games that you have trolleys coming from all these different restaurants. I used the one from Over Under on 11th and Wash Ave. Back in 2005, and I told Frank Viverito and other people at the Sports Commission, I wish there was a way that the city could figure out, I'm not talking about something fancy like light rail, have a trolley system that takes people from Wash Ave to Busch Stadium to Soulard, because when you have these big events like the Final Four, that just makes it easier. And I think during the 2005 Final Four, there was something like that. That doesn't seem very hard or very expensive, and yet that hasn't happened. So that's a frustration of mine.
Okay, I think let's leave it there because we've been online just about as long as we've got. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate your contributions and for your frank discussion. Thank you very much. Your frank discussion especially.
I'm always frank.
Frank.